The enemy armies killed one another. Zechariah 14. Neighbor against neighbor. Satan, when his house is divided, hath an end. Mankind against mankind. The king of the Medes and the Persians conquers Babylon. And remember when Daniel interpreted the writing that was on the wall? Mene, tekel upharsin, and he said that, was it tekel or upharsin? He interpreted to mean Perez, that thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. And that was exactly at the end of 70 years. Exactly. At the end of the Great Tribulation, the kingdom of Babylon at the end of 70 years fell, and the kingdom was divided to the Medes and the Persians. Actually, the word Perez, which was translated divided, is related to the word Persian. The Persians really were dividers. That's what the name means. And so the king of the Medes and the Persians took the kingdom, that's Christ, who's king of dividers. Who made me, what does it say? A judge and a divider over you. When the man asked about Jesus talking to his brother to split the inheritance. Who made me a judge and a divider over you? Christ is the king of the Medes and the Persians, the king of the dividers. He has taken Satan's kingdom and divided it. So now, well, just look around. Just look around. Who's been falling? Who's been falling? Are we reading day after day after day about some priest molesting some boys or a pastor's infidelity? You can read about that occasionally. Are we reading of this terrible thing happening in this church and that terrible thing? Is there tremendous mockery and shame being heaped upon the congregations at this time, as there was for 23 years of great tribulation? Where's the shame? And where is all the embarrassment coming forth from at this time? Day after day after day. It's amazing. It's amazing. This institution, that institution of the world, the news media, Hollywood, government, and this thing's coming to light exposing a shameful, sinful secret, and another thing's coming to light exposing a shameful, sinful secret, and then God's elect, because it's the day of judgment, we pounce on them. See if you're awake. No, we don't pounce. What are we doing in the day of judgment? Are we fighting? Are we the ones that are lacking mercy and forgiveness? It's their fellow man. It's their fellow man. You see, when something comes to light, there's no forgiveness. There's no forgiveness. Actually, read Isaiah 13, and it says that of the Medes and the Persians.
What verse?
Lester, you got me. It's in Isaiah 13. But it says that of the Medes and the... Well, let's go there. In Isaiah 13, which is a chapter dealing with the end of the world, Judgment Day. You can see that in verse 9, 10, 11 especially. I will punish the world. And notice verse 1 of Isaiah 13 says, the burden of Babylon. Why Babylon? And then God starts talking about punishing the world, judging the world, because it represents Satan's kingdom of this world. Forget the church. The church was overcome by Babylon and became a small part of Babylon the whole. Became a province. Well, King Nebuchadnezzar ruled over many provinces. And so this is the time, we could say, Isaiah 13 is dealing with the end of the 70 years. The burden of Babylon is the judgment on the world. And after telling us in verse 11, I will punish the world, look, it says in verse 15, everyone that is found shall be thrust through, and everyone that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. Their children also shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses shall be spoiled, and their wives ravished. This is the Babylonians, or the world. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Their bows also shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eye shall not spare children. That means no mercy. No mercy. If you're not going to have mercy on children, there'll be no mercy on anyone else. So, when a shameful secret, even like 40 years ago, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No mercy, no forgiveness. Isn't it? It's really a wonderful testimony to God's great goodness and His tremendous mercy. Can you imagine if the mindset of the people of the world were in God? It would be all wrath, all destruction. But here God sees that we have sinned how many times? Countless. It says in James that he who converteth the sinner from the error of his ways shall hide a multitude of sins. A multitude of sins in thought, word, and deed. And God washes them all away, forgives them all. He is merciful. And He was merciful to His people in the day of salvation. But this is Judgment Day. And so God raises up the spirit of the kings of the Medes. It says in Jeremiah, it's the spirit of the kings of the Medes and the Persians to come against Babylon, or the unsaved inhabitants of the earth, and they're destroying one another right before the witness or the eyes of all of God's people. We're noticing that. I mean, just think. Notice how the character of all these things has changed. It's turned, hasn't it? It's not, being smug and arrogant and boasting, where the world is putting down some aspect of truth of the Bible that the church once represented. No, it's the world again and again and again that's being put down, that's looking foolish and weak and chaotic and all the things that were characteristic of the corporate church are now true of the world itself. And there's nobody out there, no nation, there's no organization of the world that is beyond or above this, that is not impacted by it. That's why it could be, tomorrow may start another area of some institution of the world, and we may hear about all kinds of evils it's done. Well, okay, let's go to, I kind of got lost in my notes a little bit. Let's go to Ezekiel 35. Ezekiel 35. And I'm not sure how much time I have left. Anybody? Well, okay, Ezekiel 35, beginning in verse 2. Son of man, set thy face against Mount Seir. And what's another name for Mount Seir? Edom, Esau. It's Jacob's brother Esau. And Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. Set thy face against Mount Seir, and prophesy against it, and say unto it, Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, Behold, O Mount Seir, I am against thee. I will stretch out mine hand against thee, and will make thee most desolate. I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be desolate. And thou shalt know that I am Jehovah, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel, by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity. Now this reminds us of Obadiah. It's the same charge against Esau in that one chapter book of Obadiah, which had to do with the judgment on the church during the Great Tribulation. In the time that their iniquity had an end. Well, then go down to verse 12. And thou shalt know, God's still speaking to Esau, that I am Jehovah, and that I have heard all thy blasphemies, which thou hast spoken against the mountains of Israel, saying, they are laid desolate, they are given us to consume. Thus with your mouth ye have boasted against me, and have multiplied your words against me. I have heard them. Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, when the whole earth rejoiceth, I will make thee desolate. When the whole earth rejoiceth, I will make thee desolate. When did that happen? Who can forget the party?
That's right.
Who can forget the party? The jubilance, the exaltation. And it was all over the world, because this was a worldwide declaration to all the nations, and it was everywhere. It was everywhere. And the news media picked it up, and when it did not happen as we had thought it would, because we thought there would be an actual literal shaking of the ground on that day, and you know, the world is only concerned with actual physical things. It does not understand spiritual things. If they don't see it, they don't believe it. And so when the ground did not shake, they rejoiced. They rejoiced. It's all wrong. It's all false. And remember the laughter and the mockery. It's still fresh in my mind. But remember that time. That's when the whole earth rejoices. And at that time, I will make thee desolate. Speaking to Esau, who is representative of the unsaved. You see, at the very time, the very instant the world was celebrating, what did God do? He shut the door of heaven. He ended his salvation program, and he made the whole earth desolate. He sealed the fate of every unsaved individual. And for all intents and purposes, he slew them even as they were having the party. I will make thee desolate. Then verse 15, as thou didst rejoice at the inheritance of the house of Israel, because it was desolate, and that is the corporate church, so will I do unto thee. You see how again and again this recompense, this repayment, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Well, it's here again. Where was I? So will I do unto thee, thou shalt be desolate, O Mount Seir, and all Idumea, even all of it, and they shall know that I am Jehovah. And they shall know through the experience of it, not intellectually necessarily. And if we go back to Ezekiel 39, that recompense, I just want to mention this, is in verse 10, so that they shall take no wood out of the field, neither cut down any out of the forest, for they shall burn the weapons with fire, and they shall spoil those that spoiled them, and rob those that robbed them, saith the Lord Jehovah. Repay. It's repayment. And anyway, when this is something that's new that we've recently learned concerning this recompense. It's in also in Revelation 18, might be the most well-known verse concerning it. Revelation 18, verse 6, speaking of Babylon, Satan's kingdom, reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she has filled, fill to her double. It doesn't make sense until you first understand that Babylon destroyed the church. Babylon destroyed the temple of Jehovah. Therefore, reward her, repay. And in 2 Thessalonians 1, verse 4, it says, so that we ourselves glory in you and the churches of God for your patience and faith in all your persecutions and tribulations that ye endure. Tribulations is plural. It's not singular, it's plural. Great tribulation, 23 years. Recompense of tribulation. It goes on in verse 5 and 6, which is a manifest token of the righteous judgment of God, that ye may be counted worthy of the kingdom of God, for which ye also suffer, seeing it is a righteous thing with God to recompense tribulation to them that trouble you. Repay tribulation. We're looking at a 23-year inclusive timeline from 2011 to 2033, 22 actual years, which in history we also have a timeline like that from 609, when that 70-year period began, to 587. That's 22 years, 23 years inclusive. Here, 2011 to 2033, 23 years inclusive, 22 actual years. Another tribulation. Another tribulation. And, you know, we're well into it as we're learning about it, which is similar to the first tribulation. It was, for a time, it wasn't until after 1994 we learned a lot of things. It wasn't until after 2001 we learned even more. God often works that way. Once you're in it, then He opens up the understanding to it. Also in Romans chapter 2, where God is speaking of rendering to every man according to his deeds in verse 6, and verse 5 spoke of the righteous judgment of God. And both of those things go together in several verses where Christ will judge mankind according to their works. Well, then, in verse 8, but unto them that are contentious and do not obey the truth. That relates to what verse? Very important verse. Who does not obey the truth? Or where does God make reference of those that do not obey the truth? 1 Peter 4, verse 17. For the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of God. First tribulation. And if it first begin at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God? Second tribulation. First, at the house of God. Second, them that obey not. At least in the church they give appearance or lip service to obeying God. The world doesn't. They're flat out deniers and refusers, and they don't obey God. So 1 Peter 4:17 is referring to both. And actually, I should have read this. 2 Thessalonians 1, after saying it's a righteous thing with God to recompense tribulation to them that trouble you, notice verse 8, when Jesus is revealed from heaven with his mighty angels, in flaming fire taking vengeance on them that know not God and that obey not the gospel. Second tribulation. Mankind. First, judgment at the house of God. Second, upon them that obey not the gospel. And in Romans 2, verse 8 and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, indignation, and wrath, tribulation, and anguish upon every soul of man that doeth evil, of the Jew first, 1 Peter 4:17, and also of the Gentile, them that obey not the gospel, the world. And notice tribulation and anguish upon every soul. You have the tribulation and anguish first upon the church, secondly upon the Gentile, or the people of the world. 2 tribulations. Faint not at my tribulations for you, which is your glory. It says in Ephesians 3. Because at the end, if you endure, and sadly some people, they went through the first, but as soon as God transitioned to the second, lacking understanding, hopefully, that's true with some of them, they have fainted. They have failed. They've gone back to former things. But it's those that endure to the end that will glorify God and receive glory in the new heaven and new earth. But anyway, I think I've gone on for a while. Now we're going back to Ezekiel 39. We want to look, Lord willing, in verse 3, where God is fighting now against Gog. Not true during the judgment on the church. It is true of this battle, the battle judgment day, just like in 2 Chronicles 20. You, the people of Judah, God, typifying God's elect, will not fight. The Lord will fight for you. So God fought, and the way God is fighting this battle is by stirring up animosity, all the sinful tendencies and nature of mankind, and just letting them run rampant. And so man is at the throat of his fellow man, and that's how it should continue until the completion of this time. Well, then in verse 4, thou shalt fall